What is up, Pitt fans? Thank you so much for turning to Inside the Panthers on YouTube once again. My name is Steven Thompson, coming at you with another Inside Pitt practice report following practice number 15 from the south side of Pittsburgh. Just got back from the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex. Another big day for the Pitt Panthers. Lighter in terms of the actual football, but important preparation work for their second scrimmage of training camp. So that's what we'll start today because, again, like I said, as a week comes to a close, it means it's scrimmage time, and that means things start to get real for guys who are fighting for positions and guys who are looking to earn some playing time and maybe even some starting jobs. So, like I said, a bit of a lighter practice. Guys were just in their spider pads, which are lighter. They were not in full pads. They weren't hitting each other. It was real walkthrough vibes and energy from this practice today as they get set to head over to Acrisure Stadium on Saturday. We heard it though from head coach Pat Narduzzi, defensive coordinator Randy Bates, wide receivers coach Taekwon Underwood, and defensive line coach Charlie Partridge this week. This is a really key scrimmage. The first one, guys are still figuring each other out. They're still feeling out where they are in this team and trying to get things down, like the offense, and try to get to know each other. But the second one is where guys really start to compete, and it's where they start to maybe separate themselves as in some of these position battles. It was up and down. Everyone thought that this scrimmage is where guys really separate themselves. This is where the depth chart really starts to materialize, and these ideas of who's going to play with who and who's going to play when and who are our top options in these game-like scenarios in a scrimmage at Acrisure Stadium, an in-stadium environment, as Mike Tomlin would like to sometimes refer to these things like this as. This is where guys can really show whether or not they're capable of performing for this team when the lights are the brightest. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those position battles and what I kind of expect and what I'm keeping my eye on and thinking about as we head into the scrimmage this weekend. Obviously receiver is still an open question. I get the sense that Taekwon Underwood and the rest of the coaching staff is still preferential to experience. But like we've talked about all the time, those four freshmen, they keep knocking on the door and they keep making a really strong impression, beginning with Kenny Johnson, I think, who's been by far the most impressive guy out of that four-man freshman class. Uh, you know, Taekwon Underwood said that these guys are not, there's no training wheels with them. They keep throwing them in the fire was the quote that he used because experience is the best teacher. And these guys all kind of bring something different. So he kind of feels like even if one doesn't start, I guess three don't start, they'll all get chances to show what they can do and bring that kind of extra element, that different element that they bring to the table. But don't sleep on Dejon Reynolds or Jake McConaughey. Like I said, the experience is still really big with this staff. It's big with Pat Narduzzi. It's hard for true freshmen especially, to break in and play significant snaps on Pitt teams. That's just historically been the case, at least, especially head coach of this team, and I don't expect that to change. But these freshmen are certainly going to push it. Especially given that McConaughey's still not on scholarship. He's not a scholarship player; he's a walk on. Reynolds, a completely new guy, and only has 11 career receptions to his name. I know he was at Florida. That's big time football, but still, there's not a lot. There's some experience in college football, but not actual game experience there either. You can talk about Chen and as well as a guy who's, I think, outperformed some expectations at camp, but again, not a ton of experience there either. And he's got some speed, but, you know, I think there might be some more complete players in that freshman receiving class, but they're going to find out a lot about what these guys are made of and how complete of players they are and how much Pitt will be able to rely on one, two, even three, maybe of these guys going forward. Who's really going to be in the rotation and who can separate, if anyone can separate themselves as a bona fide third starter that Pitt is looking for. Moving on, talk about linebacker a little bit. This one is definitely more set. We've talked about those top four guys of Shane Simon, Brandon George, Bengali Kamara, and Solomon DeShields. All those guys I expect to play and kind of rotate in at a certain points. Definitely rotate a lot more, or maybe even look a lot more similar to what the Panthers did last year with Tyler Wiltz coming in a lot alongside Saracier Dennis and then Simon and Kamara. But there's some interesting stuff going on. I think kind of if you think about the 2 deep on that second string, Pat Narduzzi again reiterated that Braylon Lovelace will play this year. Like that's not an if, that's not a oh he could. That is very definitively this guy is good enough to be in the rotation. He put on 25 pounds. He told us today to get him up to 220. He came in during the spring semester at the start of the spring semester in January at 195, and the coaches said, "Look, you need to put on more weight to be able to play ACC football." So he did that, and he is a guy who, Pat Narduzzi said at the end of spring practices, this is a guy who could play for us this year, and they seem even more confident in him right now and in his ability to play immediately and contribute to this team right away. So he's a guy to watch, but there's still kind of one more second string spot kind of flying around there. I think Kyle Lewis has really impressed me and the coaching staff. He's been a topic of conversation. He's a guy that the coaches have talked about. He was injured for basically all of last season, but he's really pushing for a spot as well. It's a bunch of takeaway stickers on his helmet. But Aiden Henningham, Rasheem Biles, and Jordan Bass, these are underclassmen that the Panthers are real confident in too. Pat Narduzzi has been raving about, especially Biles and Bass. Those are guys that are true freshmen, but that they love their athleticism, and it's just all about kind of getting the playbook in order for them. So I don't expect the Panthers to go that much deeper, but there are still battles on those backup spots that I'm sure Ryan Menelik will be watching closely. He has really, I would say, 4 proven commodities, guys that he really knows what he's going to get out of them. But, those backup spots are wide open, and there's some interesting stuff going on and some guys who could, one injury away from being real contributors to this team. Moving on a little bit to another one that I think has the starting spots really nailed down, but that's safety. I'm pretty ready to just call PJ O'Brien and Javon McIntyre starters right now. It seems kind of reading between the lines with what Pat Narduzzi and some of these other coaches are saying. Those are guys who have really separated themselves, even with Stephon Hall racking up the takeaway stickers and making some plays and being real impressive, along with Donovan McMillan, who I think is coming along a little bit better than and just continues to make strides as he comes in as a transfer from Florida and learns the defense. But O'Brien and McIntyre seem like the guys there. I do expect eventually uh, the Panthers to rotate safeties a lot more than they did last year when you got Brandon Hill and Eric Hallett, and those are just your guys, and they're head and shoulders above what the rest of the room looks like. But I don't think that's the case this year. I think O'Brien and McIntyre have separated themselves, but it's not kind of head and shoulders like these are our only 2 guys like it was with Hill and Hallett. So do expect McMillan and Hall to play. It's just, like I said, in this scrimmage where things are going to get decided, it's really going to be about, okay, how much can we trust these second string guys? Are these second string guys players that we need to get in games, that we need to put in the rotation to make sure that they're getting enough snaps? Or are they just, good depth pieces that we can be confident about if, break in case of emergency? So that's something I'm watching too at the safety position. And then at O-line's gotten pretty interesting. Ryan Baer, I think we've talked about him before, but he's really emerged as a force on the offensive line, playing a couple different positions, but looking good doing it. And they love his talent, and he's young. But Jason Collier has also entered the conversation alongside Branson Taylor. He's playing a little bit of guard and tackle too. So these guys maintaining some versatility. There's an open left guard and a left tackle spot that, or I guess, I kind of expect Matt Gonsalves to take that left tackle spot. So probably a right tackle and a left guard spot. I think Zubovic's gonna man that right guard spot, and then obviously Jake Cradle the center. But guys with versatility are probably the guys that are going to stand out in this group. A guy like Branson Taylor, who's taken a ton of snaps at left tackle, maybe could be on the outside looking in, especially considering that he was hurt a little bit earlier in the year during the spring. So that's something Dave Borbley shared at Media Day, offensive line coach. So that's just an interesting, especially with Collier kind of seeming to enter the mix a little bit more recently. That's a spot I'm watching as well. Baer seems pretty solidly on an upward trend towards a starting spot, but how the rest of it shakes out and if Baer can keep that upward trajectory going does kind of remain to be seen. So, in addition to those top spots, I want to transition a little bit to talk about the youth, which we heard a lot about over this past week. The Panthers, especially on defense, we talked about those four receivers that's been kind of beaten to death a little bit, but on defense, there's a lot of guys that the Panthers are really excited about. I talked about those linebackers a little bit. Lovelace, especially. This is a guy who came from, in the latest recruiting class, came from the smallest school, played at the lowest division of high school football in Western Pennsylvania. So I don't think many people expected him to be so good and be so good right away, especially. It's like I said, very rare for true freshmen, to break out and establish themselves as contributors in Pat Narduzzi led teams. But Lovelace is well on his way to doing that. They think he's going to be a real special player, and that starts right now. They also love the athleticism between Biles and Bass. This was just a theme throughout the entire week. Every defensive coach we talked to raved about those guys and continues to think that their athleticism is really just the beginning of something special that they have in that linebacker room. And I think I talked about this on the last episode too, just coming from a place in the spring when Ryan Mantle, like the linebackers coach, thought that the position was thin. To see kind of this abundance of young talent is pretty encouraging if you're rooting for Pitt, if you're a Pitt coach or anything like that. Moving on to DB a little bit, behind these linebackers, Cruz Brookins has come up multiple times as a guy, a true freshman who's really impressing. Pat Narduzzi said running with the twos a little bit. They're trying not to overload him just yet because he is also playing two positions. I think when the regular season comes around, he might stick a little bit more at safety. But after that, Randy Bates said, we're going to play around with it. We're going to see what he can do at corner. We're going to see what he can do at safety too, and just find the best spot because he's a smart kid. He's been able to handle that and learn both positions while also playing well at both positions. It's really funny when I think about, talking to Brandon George about his freshman year, and he told me he felt like he was drowning his first year. But you think about a guy like Brookins, who is not just climbing up the depth chart, but handling all of these other things that he's got to deal with while he's doing that. Other DBs, Noah Bigelow, Tamarian Crumpley, and Rylan Gandy. Gandy, a redshirt freshman, according to Pat Narduzzi, is that fourth corner. We know the top three: MJ Devonshire, Marquez Williams, and AJ Woods. Pitt loves that trio. They're going to rotate them. Those guys are all going to play a lot. But Gandy, a young guy, a really young guy, is pushing for that fourth spot. So I think that's also something interesting to see. If, like I think mentioned with the safeties, is this a deal where, yeah, Gandy's a second stringer, but just the way the rotation settles out, how confident are they that he can actually play and that he can contribute, or is he just, break in case of emergency? I think that's something that they're also going to learn over the next couple of weeks, and especially in that scrimmage on Saturday. But Bigelow and Crumpley have also been guys that Pat Narduzzi has praised all camp. Crumpley was a guy even going back to last year that Pat Narduzzi was impressed with. These are redshirt sophomores. So these guys with a little bit of experience, but not necessarily a ton of game experience. That could change this year if certain things happen. If one of those top corners gets hurt, those are the guys you got to look at to see again. Are they just second stringers to be second stringers because they're the second stringers we got, or are these guys who are capable of contributing? That's something to watch too. And then on the defensive line, we got a pretty complete rundown from Charlie Partridge. And I will get to one of his guys who, I think might end up being a reserve, but I think is going to play a really significant amount of snaps. But I want to talk about him a little bit later. We'll talk about some more young guys. Isaiah Neal continues to impress. This is a guy that even from, the first time we met him on signing day or after signing day, I guess when he arrived for spring practices, a guy that people raved about as a leader, as a smart kid, and in addition to being a really talented defensive lineman. So that's someone to watch as well. In addition to Jimmy Scott, Sam Okunlola, and Sean Fitzsimmons. Fitzsimmons is a guy who I think could be a real stud right away. Even in a crowded room with David Green and Devin Danielson and Tyler Bentley kind of at the front, Fitzsimmons is a redshirt sophomore that I think is more than capable of playing right away and being really good for Pitt right away. Kind of in that mold of, Kalijah Cansey, kind of those undersized defensive tackles that Pitt really likes, but has some speed and could really make some noise. So Charlie Partridge told us that roles will be set after this scrimmage, or will start to be set. So, we'll see, like I said, just how much of this is smoke. How much of this is we like the future of what we got here, or we've got some guys that can contribute right away, because it seems like there's a little bit of a different vibe when you move from position to position. So I want to go back to one of those defensive linemen I talked about, maybe a reserve, an older guy, but a guy that I think his career arc kind of proves, and I've heard this term like tossed around sometimes, but proof of concept within this Pitt program. We hear all the time about, development and, how this is a program that really loves to develop their players. They recruit high school athletes and they're patient with them. They want guys to stick around and see it the whole way through. And that guy's DeAndre Jules, a defensive lineman. We've heard about him, even going back into spring camp, but a guy that Randy Bates is really excited about, a guy who has slimmed down, become more athletic, and just something clicked for him. Talking to Charlie Partridge today, he said, you know, Jules just kind of gets it now. He's much more mature. He's matured off the field. That combined with the weight loss, he's kind of handling his business and kind of the organizational things of being a college athlete a little bit better, and it's allowed the talent that he has to really shine through. So, it's just, we have to wait to see how it unfolds on the field. But, I take Charlie Partridge at his word that this guy just needed some time, and that there are a lot of players like that, and that this is this is real, and he's producing and he's playing well, and that is further confirmation of something that Pat Narduzzi and the rest of his coaching staff really harp on, and that's the development aspect of it. Pitt does not recruit 5 stars; they barely recruit 4 stars, but they can take a 3-star or a 2-star and turn him into something special if that guy puts in the work and they have the time to really mold him into something. Because I think about DeAndre Jules, and he was someone that was not even close to on my radar when I started thinking about what the two deep was going to look like, who was going to contribute, who even had a chance to compete for some of these snaps. But at the end of the day, at the end of camp, if you take Randy Bates's word, if you take Charlie Partridge and Pat Narduzzi's word for it, a guy who's going to contribute a lot and play a lot on the defense for the Pitt Panthers this year. But with that, that's all I've got. Closing another week of Pitt practice with you on the Inside Pitt practice report. We will be back. I will be back on Tuesday. That is the next time the Panthers practice. So I'll be coming back at you with another Inside Pitt practice report then. Until then, make sure to like this video, subscribe to us on YouTube. That's youtube.com/@InsideThePanthers. And then follow our reports from training camp at InsideThePanthers.com. I'll be covering the Steelers this weekend as they take on the Buffalo Bills in some preseason action. So make sure to check out our Steelers coverage at allsteelers.com, also at youtube.com/allsteelerstalk. Until next time, see you.